Giannis getting traded out of Milwaukee feels like a real possibility for the first time, maybe ever. And even if you don't think that will happen, like I'm still a skeptic about that, I think we all have been thinking about how should this hypothetical trade look for the Bucks. I've wanted to talk about it for a few days, and I found this ESPN article with 5 ideas for Giannis trades that allowed me to talk not only about these specific scenarios, but also how do I think the Bucks should face the case that Giannis asked to be traded. So I'm going to react to these ideas, I'm going to rank them, I'm going to grade them, and I'm going to give my general thoughts on what the Bucks should do if Giannis demands to be traded. First, we have the Hawks trade, where the Bucks would send Giannis and Cole Anthony to Atlanta and would get Trae Young, Zachary Richardson, and 4 first-round picks in exchange. There's been a lot of talk about the Atlanta Hawks in the last few days, and it makes sense because Atlanta kind of controls the Bucks draft future. And so if they trade Giannis, it's likely they're going to be rebuilding and tanking, and so they would like to have their own draft picks. And that's what makes this trade make a lot of sense in my opinion. The key part of this trade package in my opinion are the 2026 and 2027 draft picks. In 2026, the Bucks could get their own pick or even the Pelicans one if it turns out to be better, which looks kind of possible right now. And in 2027, they would be getting the worst pick of their own or the Pelicans one, with the only exception being if they both are top 4, in which case New Orleans would get both, but that feels pretty unlikely. That would give the Bucks 2 good draft picks in the first 2 years after Giannis is traded, which is huge because as it is right now, the Bucks don't control their own draft picks until 2031, which is a long time from now. And so, if the Bucks don't get at least some control over their draft picks back, they would probably be tanking or at least being not a very good team without a real chance of having a good draft pick to start to rebuild the roster. And if you've been following the league for a few years now, you know how catastrophic that could get. Like we have this example with the Nets that traded a bunch of draft picks to Boston to get Kevin Garnett and Paul Pierce. That trade turned out to be a disaster because they were super old, so the Nets became pretty bad almost immediately. But the Celtics had their picks, so the Celtics were picking great players like Tatum or Brown with the Nets draft picks, while the Nets were one of the worst teams in the league. And that could happen to the Bucks if they don't get some draft capital back. If you look at the players, this isn't a bad package either. I know a lot of Bucks fans would like to have Jalen Johnson in here, but I don't think the Hawks would like to trade Johnson right now. I think they would try to get that out of the table. And so I'm not really sure I would say yes to this trade package immediately. It looks pretty promising because I don't love Trae Young, but I think he's a pretty tradable NBA star that you could become in some more draft picks or maybe some young players. And Zachary Richardson, even not the best number 1 draft pick ever, admittedly, is a young player with a lot of potential. I don't think he would be a super NBA star, but he can be a solid player in the future. And I even think you could ask for more young players than the Hawks have. Like, I don't know, Mohamed Gay looks pretty promising. And I don't think the Hawks would say no to having in this trade. So overall, I think this could be an A-tier trade. Like, I don't love it, but unless this turns into a 3-team trade, 4-team trade, which could happen, but if it gets just 1-on-1 with one team, I don't think the Bucks could do way better than this, mainly because of the picks. Like, I'd rather have 2 good picks or the Bucks' own picks than have 5 first-round picks that are in the late 20s. So it's not an exciting trade, but I think it's a solid one. It is at least way more reasonable than the New York Knicks one, who would be sending Karl Anthony Towns, Pacom Dadiet, Tyler Kolek, 1 first-round pick, and 3 swaps rights for Giannis and Jericho Sims. I honestly feel this is as bad as it can get. I don't like anything about this trade package, and I know there's been a lot of noise about the Knicks because Giannis is supposed to want to play there, but I'm sorry, I think there's no way to make this work. First, the draft capital just sucks here. Like, the pick swaps are mostly meaningless because if you send Giannis to New York, the Knicks are going to be pretty good for a few years, and the Bucks won't. And so that pick swaps won't ever be converted most of the time. But it could get even worse because the one first round pick in here has a protection from the Wizards in case it is a top 8. And as the Wizards are right now, it would be guaranteed to be in the top 8, meaning the Bucks wouldn't get a first round pick here. They would be getting 2 second round picks, which feels like nothing for a team that's in a rebuilding situation. And then, if you look at the players, there's nothing interesting happening here either. Like, Kolek and Davied are not super promising players that I would be thrilled about. And then Cat is like, why would the Bucks want him, right? He's like a worse version of Giannis. He won't make this team competitive if it wasn't competitive with Giannis. He's not super tradable. He has this big contract. I don't think people love the way he plays in the playoffs, so I don't think other franchise would be calling the Bucks immediately and sending draft picks and young players to the Bucks for Cat. So I don't know. I think this brings basically nothing for the Bucks. I absolutely hate it. I think this is an F tier trade. Then we got the Rockets trade, in which the Bucks would be getting Alperen Sengun, Fred VanVleet, and a first round pick via Phoenix Suns from 2027. A trade that feels kind of a better version than the Knicks one. Like, there are few draft picks, but we already said that the draft picks the Knicks were sending were basically meaningless. I don't know, maybe the Suns won't be super good in 2027. I don't think they will, so this won't be a top 5 pick, but it could be a decent pick, I don't know. And then Sengun might be the best player on the table for this trade, which maybe is not a great thing because, as I said, I think if the Bucks trade Giannis, they would be just willing to rebuild, willing to tank, and you probably won't want to have an all-star player on your team because what are you going to do with that? He's not going to be all that helpful, but he's not going to help you to be a bad team. So you're probably going to be in this middle ground, like in this Chicago Bulls zone, where you are way better than the tanking teams, but not good enough to face the good teams. So yeah, you spend like 5 years in there, like fighting for nothing, basically. The question here would be, could you turn Sengun into some young players and draft picks, right? But the thing is, if that's what you want to do with Sengun, why wouldn't you do it with Giannis from the beginning, right? Because you're probably going to get something better. I don't know, I overall hate trades that don't get the Bucks any tool to rebuild. And by that I mean young players and draft capital. So yeah, this is one of them, so I don't really like it. But this is a weird idea to start because I think if the Bucks and the Rockets would start a conversation about a Giannis trade, Amen Thompson would be the one on the table, not Sengun. It makes sense for both teams, I think, because the Bucks could get a pretty promising young player, and even for the Rockets, like having Giannis and Thompson at the same time on the court could create some pretty heavy spacing problems, I think. So I honestly feel he might be the one to go. And so if you switch Sengun for Thompson, this package looks better in my opinion, because the Bucks would be getting a young player they could try to build around. It wouldn't be a great package because the draft capital is still so bad here, but I don't know, maybe this would be a starting point and then the Rockets would try to get in touch with other franchise to try to get draft picks they could send to Milwaukee. I don't know, I don't love this idea, but I think there's something here, so this is going to be a C tier, maybe? Now we get to the Spurs, who would be sending Stephen Castle, Harrison Barnes, Kelly Olynyk, Jordan McLaughlin, and 3 first-round picks to the Bucks, which it's something. Again, I don't like that the Bucks would be getting the picks from the team who's getting Giannis because that team is going to be pretty good, and so those picks wouldn't be great picks. They would be almost second-round picks. even if they are from 2032, because the Spurs are going to have Victor Wembanyama in their prime in 2032. So that's not going to be a good pick. So the main piece here would be Castle. And I like Castle, I think he's growing into a pretty good player, but I don't think he can get to a player you could build your team around. So I'm not really in love with this package. I think the Bucks should really ask for Dylan Harper here, and I honestly don't think the Spurs have a super strong reason to say no if they want to go into win now mode, which I assume they will if you have Wemby and Giannis in your roster. When discussing the Hawks trade, I said I don't think the Hawks are willing to trade Jalen Johnson, and that's because I think they want to be a Jalen Johnson team more than they want to be a Trae Young team at this point. But even if the Spurs have a lot of faith in Dylan Harper, I don't think this will ever be the case with him. Like, the Spurs are going to be the Wemby team for years. And so I don't think this is such a big price to pay for them, and I think this is something they should consider. And if you get Dylan Harper in here, then we are talking, right? Then this could get to an A-tier trade. But as it is right now, you have a promising young player, but with not that high of a ceiling in my opinion. You have a few tradable pieces in Harrison Barnes and Kelly Olynyk, but you are not going to get that much in exchange. So I don't know. Not a bad trade package overall, but far from an exciting one. I think this is a B-tier trade. And then we have the Warriors, which is pretty surprising to me. I didn't expect to watch Golden State here, but in this trade idea, they would be sending Draymond Green, Jonathan Kuminga, Buddy Hield, and 4 first-round picks to Milwaukee. In this case, the draft capital makes a bit more sense, even if it is from the team getting Giannis, because yeah, the Warriors would be great with him, but if you look at the 2030 and 2032 picks, Stephen Curry and Jimmy Butler aren't going to be playing anymore. I don't think so. And what that means for Giannis, right? Maybe he's not in Golden State anymore. Maybe they are a bad team at that point, and so those picks become pretty good picks. But I think the Bucks should prioritize their immediate future when thinking about draft capital, right? I don't think they should be waiting until 2032 to have a good draft pick. If you trade Giannis, you want a good pick immediately so you can start rebuilding. So yeah, this is not a good bunch of draft picks, but the bunch of players is even worse, I think, because why would the Bucks want any of that? You'd have to be super high on Jonathan Kuminga, which I don't think anybody is at this point, to even think about this, because Draymond Green is a player that doesn't fit at all in a rebuilding roster. Buddy Hield could become a tradable piece, but not really a super good one. And yeah, then you have Kuminga, who is not going to become a great player. He could be a good scorer in a bad team, but is that the kind of player you want to get for Giannis? I don't think so. I don't think this trade makes any sense for the Bucks. This could even be even worse than the Knicks one, I think. I'm not sure, maybe not, because at least here you have some real picks, but it is pretty bad. So, these were my takes on these trade ideas. Let me know what you think. Let me know if there's another trade package out there that you like. Let me know what you think the Bucks should be prioritizing. And subscribe if you enjoyed the video and want to follow me for more Milwaukee Bucks content. Thanks for watching.